Hi, today we're going to take a look at the designs made by the team. So we're starting a new design for the Midjourney course, and then I'm going to give my feedback as to what is good and what is bad and how to improve the design. Keep in mind that these are very early designs, meaning that they're going to have a lot of mistakes, and that's the point. The point is that I'm going to give the suggestions and the techniques to improve from a very rough design into something that is far more production ready. So let's get started. Now we have about 3 designs right now. One from Surasit, one from Axon, and another from Suani. So our 3 designers at Design Code. And we're gonna get started with Surasit. So always start with inspiration, meaning that we have a design that we generate from Midjourney. So in the course, we share the prompts and we're looking for inspiration, colors, looking for layout. Obviously, the typography is not going to be final, but it does give us a sense of priorities, you know, like the way that you separate the elements, the way you prioritize the elements, and the direction in general. So here, I don't know why we have a giant logo in front, but you know, I think it's important here at this point, and I think a lot of designers, they don't prioritize enough the sense of taste, because especially in the day and age of AI, taste is so important. Taste, what is taste? Taste is studying, is like using apps. It's like understanding what is the difference between a bad design and a good design. And this is something that you develop over time, over many years. And some people, even without the execution, especially people who are strong in UX, they have a very, very strong sense of taste, but not a very, very strong sense of visual design. So this is where AI comes into play. It's going to help you determine what is the perfect layout for you, what responds to the brand, what, you know, kind of design that you want to create at the end of the day. So when you have a good sense of taste, it's going to make this process so much easier. Now you can see these are some of the colors and layouts. I think some of these designs are pretty good. Most of them are very busy, obviously. So for example, this one have some very good elements that I can, as a designer, could definitely use. For example, you know, I think this is a very interesting layout that you can make even better. This card here, very interesting. I would definitely not use it different size. I think it's very messy the way it is. You can have inspiration for buttons. You know, I think AI is definitely not perfect. Like this button makes no sense. This one is a little bit better, maybe for a plus and minus sign. This is very good for like maybe entering a credit card or something, with an icon showing the status. This is very clean. Out of all the design, I think this is the cleanest one. And if my design has to be clean, probably I would pick this one. So you have the logo, you have the menu, the sign up, title, description button. You have a bit of a layout play. So, you know, you want to explain a little bit more about what is this product. So you have a little card showing the different features, and then you have like maybe a timeline or some sort of progression. You know, you also want to have differences in portions of the layout, so to keep things interesting. You don't want to make your layout too generic, because if all your layout is about is like logo, menu, title, description, button, like I can guarantee you that 90% of products and landing page have exactly this layout. So it's fine if you want to set maybe the first 30 or 50% of your layout starting with that, but what is not fine is if you set the entire website like that. So at the end of the day, what sets your layout apart is what you set up next, which is this portion right here at the bottom. And obviously the illustrations and the colors and all that stuff. But you can see, based on that principle, most of these layouts pretty much have the same starting point. You know, whether it's left or right, it doesn't matter much, but they all start the same way. Title, description, button. You know, title, description, button, and sometimes you have these little extra information that makes it interesting. But the bottom portion is always different, right? So this is very different, very different, very different. So anyways, let's take a look at the final, well, not final, but the early results when we take a design and then we make it into a real design. So now we have 3 iterations. So we have the first one, which is more orange, purple, and then with a slightly different layout. And also, we have to understand that each layout serves different purpose. So for example, this layout is more like an updates, notifications. This layout is more for a landing page, and so this one as well. And you can tell from the way that you're setting up the title, description, and button. But again, I can't stress enough that this is very early and this is mostly about exploration at this point. But I'm going to point out some weaknesses, right? Regardless of what level that you are, I think it's important to look at it from, okay, where can I improve? Okay, so the first thing that you have to rely on is kind of like your first impression. You know, is this something in the right direction? You know, is this something that feels clean and structured and stuff like that? And for me, and especially for modern layouts, I think most of these layouts are a little bit too busy. Nowadays, designers have really become so much better. If I look at design like this, I feel like it's so busy that it feels like a design made in 2000 or 2010, where it's very busy, it's very like in your face. So my first criticism looking at this is to tone down the colors, to tone down all of these elements that scream for attention, right? So, you know, it's important to understand priority. And this will happen a lot when you start a design, is that you want to give your 110% on every element. You know, the button has to scream, you know, the menu has to scream, you have a gradient here, and you have another button here, you have 3 more buttons here, you have this giant element here that is screaming too much. So the first thing I would do is to tone down, okay? So for example, we don't need all of these to be colored, because then, you know, already I'm feeling so much better looking at, you know, this, okay, right? So already it feels like it's screaming less, so that I can focus more my attention here. And as well, you don't want every single element to be at the same level of opacity. So you can use opacity. So for example, 50% opacity to make it scream less, right? So it's important to balance neutral color with colorful. And it's important also to think of colors as more like for call to actions. And this is especially important for iOS design. For web design, it's a little bit more like the wild, wild west. But for iOS, it's super important to not have colors everywhere. Colors are meant for call to actions, such as buttons, such as interactive elements. But see, just making this small change feels like I can breathe so much easier now. The same, I mean, this is fine, but definitely this is, just this small detail here. And, the way that I did here was to, I think that this color here is screaming so much for attention. So I'm going to set it to 20%. And already it's a lot more subtle. Subtlety is good in design. Design should be transparent. When you don't notice the design, it's a good sign. When you feel like happy and you feel, I could live here, this could be my home, this could be a page that I can visit every day, that's when you know that your design is good. So design should be as transparent as possible. It should be focused on the utility, the function, the content. So if people read about it, they want to learn more about it, they want to click things, then your design is successful. But if people are like looking at it, they don't know what to do, they're confused, that's a bad thing. So the first thing that you can criticize here is that there's way too much text. People hate text. They only need just enough, which is why we want to have some rules, such as what is the maximum number of elements that make sense. So for example, a menu should never have more than 3 elements. So it's the same as the principle of phone numbers. In order to remember phone numbers, you want to separate them into about 3 numbers at a time, or maximum 4. And so the brain is able to digest that information and remember those numbers. If you put all the 10 numbers together, or the 12 numbers, whatever country you're from, it's so much harder to remember everything. Okay, so we have way too much text here, and we have too many elements. So the one thing that I want to do here is to remove like maybe about us, and just to put the 3 most important elements. Just the same way in iOS, in the tab bar, you will never see more than 3 or 4 menu items at the bottom. Well, the same principle applies to the website. You don't want to have more than 3 or 4 menu items, including the sign up. So I would probably remove like some secondary, such as research perhaps, or about us. About us, usually you want to put that at the footer. And I don't know how important research is, but you want to put, browse, which is very important, pricing, or documentations, depending on the nature of your app. The same with this. I don't think we need the text. I would probably put some graphics or icons or illustrations to represent what the text is about. So just to give you an example, I can just hide this and it's going to feel so much better already. And then here's a lot more subtle. Here I would make it less obvious, and also I want to make it more consistent in terms of the shapes that you're using. So for example, here we're using a pill shape, and here we're using something that is more square-ish. So you have to decide on the approach of your design. Like, do you want to go more with a pill shape, which is more curved, or do you want to go more with like a square-ish type of layout? So if I want to go more like this, then I would set to something like this. So this fits more a layout, like the element, so that they are in harmony together. And also, you don't want every button to be at the same level of importance, right? So for example, do you need all 5 buttons to scream attention? No, of course not. So what you want to do is basically remove the gradient on this one and just simplify. Not every element needs to have this crazy amount of detail. Most of the buttons are just extremely simple, like this. So it's just going to be a simple outline, and I think this is using overlaid, so You want to set it to like 20%. And that's it. You know, people know that it's a button from the shape of it and from the fact that it's right after the text. You also don't want to mix the alignments too much. So in this case, this is left aligned and this is center aligned. So you want to set something like this. But it's not a hard rule. So, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. In this case, I would say both have their own weakness. But yeah, like all of these buttons. And also the size. The size is super important as well. So I would make this one a little bit smaller. So maybe 36 like this. Great. You know, and I would apply all of these to the same. And this is gray. Okay. Remove, simplify. Okay, see, so here, again, we're mixing too much. We have too much text everywhere. Another thing that I would suggest is to not, you know, to make your layout as finished as possible, to not use placeholder too much. So having something like title is not very good. We have empty space at the right side. We have, again, too much text. Alignment, I think this one, because it doesn't have a container, the center align works a little bit better. Always need to align things. So this is fine. Oh, padding. Oh my God. Yes, padding. We have a lot of problems with padding. So, like, the way I would do it is, so we have a good consistency, so 64 on each side, but typically you want to have a little bit more padding in general. So you want to push things a little bit more to the right to have more spacing at the left, especially when you have a lot of empty space here. And you want to reduce this a little bit more so that you have more space. In general, what I would say is that between sections, you want to set at least a spacing of like 100, maybe 200. So have more spacing, more padding. The sizes of buttons. Small details, but they all add up. And at the end of the day, if you're able to fix all of those things with confidence, you're going to get something that looks very good at the end. It's going to look very professional and modern. I would play definitely more with the fonts. So it's good that you have different images. It's good that you have different logo, but play more with the fonts. You know, typography is everything, especially for the web. You can have so many different types. You don't have to always use, so some good fonts like Poppins and, you know, Inter, or yeah, you definitely want to have variety, not just in the images, not just in the colors, not just in the buttons, but also in the fonts. Honestly, my favorite one is this one. I think it's a lot cleaner. I wouldn't do stuff like this, for example, because I feel like this is not necessary. It just makes things more busy. Again, the same principle of colors. We don't need so many colors everywhere. So just white with opacity is fine. Some shadows work, some don't. Especially in the modern UI, the shadows tend to be a lot more spread out. So yeah, here we don't need the shadow and it should be more spread out. So for example, I like to use 10 or 20 blur. So it's a lot cleaner, but it adds contrast. So it has utility. I do like this, even though it could be a little bit more perfect. It's nice. This one has definitely like shadow problem and color problem, but this one has a nice, it's elegant. It's more elegant. So, you know, you definitely struggling with the colors. They don't really fit together. We have a lot too many lines. So I'm not a big fan of this. And definitely don't like this one. Like the outline is too much. Like it's screaming too much. I do like this. I like subtlety. So subtlety is your friend. I don't know why we have some line issues here, but otherwise the subtle gradients, the colors, like it fits elegantly into the design. So definitely this doesn't have to be glowing. You have rounded corners here, but you don't have rounded corners here, so that's a bit inconsistent. You want to have consistency. I do like the background blur here, but you don't need that much background blur, so maybe 40 is fine. It makes it more interesting. Because if you put the background blur to be too high, it doesn't feel that you have a background blur. It just feels like you have a single color. So 40 to 100, sometimes less, like 10. But 10 is it's gonna make it look busier. So that's a bit of a danger. So the purpose of the background blur is to make your layout more readable. So the content to be more readable. So again, I really like this layout. It has good padding, it's clean, but there are definitely too many elements that are screaming for attention. So for example, this, and this. So far, I really like this one. Yeah. And I feel like this is a lot more modern. And if Surasid can work from this point, she can have a very good end layout. And I think that's going to be very popular with the audience. I think this, the feeling that I have when I look at this, it feels too busy still. And it feels too generic as well. As I mentioned before, if you're always using the same layout as 99% of websites out there, people are going to ask for more. People are going to ask, well, what makes this different? You know, what makes it unique? And I don't have a big answer for that, right? Because we have very generic cards at the bottom, very generic elements, very generic text. So it doesn't stand out too much. But when I go back to this, I'm like, okay, this is different. You know, this is interesting. And it has very interesting colors, very interesting subtleties. The lines, the spacing, the padding, works really, really well. So I'm going to stop here for the first, and we're going to jump into the second one. All right, thank you for listening. Welcome to the design review for the one by Surani. And I'm going to try to touch different topics and not always the same topics. So this is the inspiration that she took from a lot of renders. And in this case, let's talk about the logo, because I think logos are very difficult for any designer, because it's not something that designers, especially new ones, spend a lot of time on honing this, because it's a very particular skill. And it has a lot to do with simplicity, branding, and all that stuff. So if you see that our designers are weak at logos, that's totally normal. It's not because they're not good designers. It's just because they haven't developed those skills. And, you know, like I said, taste is everything. And regardless of how well you do some designs, you will always have weaknesses in some aspect. So you can see that these are pretty bad logos, you know, very cheesy, very 1990s. Specific, when I say 1990s, is when design was still starting on the web, and we had a lot of, you know, junior designers, and as a result, the design tools also provided a lot of default values such as shadows and opacity of shadows, and you know, not realistic looking, right? If you look at this, it's like terrible shadows, too much in your face. The bevel of the gradients and the 3D effect is unrealistic, very cheesy. And so you definitely want to avoid this, especially if you want a modern interface. Sure, I see some designers, they want to have the 90s look and make it cheesy. If it's intended, fine. But if you want to have a modern design, you don't want to have something like this or something like this. You don't want to have these crazy, cheesy shadows and these glossiness, which is, you know, at the time of Web 2.0, like glossy buttons, very terribly made gradients that are not realistic at all. Like, why is there some sort of a, you know, a beveling here? It makes no sense. Definitely want to avoid. And also, we have to realize that Midjourney is not very good at typography. So don't expect Midjourney to do well generating text, especially for a logo. So you can definitely, it's really good for renderings of objects, such as this. You know, it does a fairly good job. And, you know, it for app icons and stuff like that, or for characters, backgrounds, wallpapers. I think Midjourney is very strong at those things. But when it comes to text, it's not very good at. And when it comes to logo, I think it depends on the simplicity of your logo and the prompt. But yeah, this is okay. I wouldn't like include the shadows and reflection. This logo definitely very too much detail, right? This would work well in the context of like a 3D animation, such as maybe for a movie trailer or something, but it doesn't work well in the context of a simplified website, which typically works well flat with very good definitions. So a logo like this doesn't work well in the context of a website, for example. Usually you want to have the black and white version, the vector version, the very flat. And the reason why is all about recognition. Just the same way typography has to be readable very easily, logo has to be easily recognizable at any resolution. And so you definitely want to avoid all of these details because we can barely see them when you minimize them. So one of the strengths of logo is that to be able to easily see what's going on at the very small, you know, like this one, for example, you can see when it's very small, it's fine. This is not a Midjourney render, so I'm not going to focus on that. Probably just an inspiration piece. So yeah, logo, very tricky. Typography, very tricky. It's not because you're not good at those things that it means you're a bad designer. I just want to point out that. But it's definitely something you should develop over time. So let's take a look at the layouts for the website. So as I mentioned before, very typical layout. So the menu at the top, and then sometimes you have a background for the menu. In this case, this is a flat background. Sometimes you don't have a background, and it depends. If you have a good background, if it's worth showing underneath or not, if like depending on the contrast of the text or not. Not very well defined. It's hard to enjoy these concepts right here. Maybe good for colors, but not a ton of elements that I would say, wow, I need to use this. And it's not well defined. The illustrations are not particularly well done, and the layout, and yeah. So I wouldn't say that the inspirations are great. Okay. So let's go into the better ones. This is a bit busy. It doesn't seem like a website, more like a pamphlet, a flyer. Now this is a lot better. So good contrast, good colors, and when you talk about what does it mean, good contrast and good colors, well, the minute you look at this, even if you don't understand what design is, you have a good feeling about it right away. And the question is, as a designer, how do you explain that? How do you explain those feelings in a way that it makes sense? And so when people listen to you, they're like, okay, that makes sense, And that's kind of like what separates the levels of design, right? Like if you're a junior designer, you're gonna have a hard time explaining all of these things. But if you're a more senior designer, you can explain all of these things, all the thought process, the documentation, the UX. You can kind of like map out how the design is gonna be, how it's gonna work, how it's gonna be animated. Everything happens in your head in advance. And it's kind of developing a sixth sense for things like that. Even if your execution is not necessarily faster than a junior designer, your thought process and the way that you map out the strategy for the design is all in your head, and that's how you stand out from junior designers. The same way you play chess, like if you're starting out chess, you're just gonna know where to go specifically, but someone who's a master at chess can predict so many movements ahead of time. So design is roughly the same thing, and what I suggest is try to develop as much as possible your taste so that you can judge faster, you can criticize faster, you can explain your decisions easier, and you can understand what makes a design tick and what works and what doesn't work. So if I look at the design right here, sure, it doesn't make much sense, but I can already see the definition of the concept forming quite well. The colors are good. Yeah, the shape doesn't make much sense. Like I don't know what these waves are and I don't know what these shapes are, but I can see like a good marriage of contrast, of colors. Like the purple goes well with the background color. These lights, brings a good accent, and the way that the layout of these elements are kind of done in a way that it feels elegant and not too busy. When you're a good designer, you can kind of map out, okay, how do I use this design to make it better and to make it make sense into a production-ready design? And so that's how I would look at these concepts. So from that, I would say that we have great concepts, but we do have a good starting position. As you can see, the designers, they love purple. You can tell from all of these renders. You can tell that they want to go with AI. You can tell that they like these abstract futuristic shape. So I guess that's roughly the direction that we're going. Now we're gonna go and take a look at the final, well, not final design, but the early design. So when I say early design, what does it mean, right? Like I throw that term right here, but what it means is that roughly the first few hours of design, roughly the first day, maybe two, depending on how confident you are. Some designers are very confident and they're very fast and efficient. They can, they can get that level of confidence and satisfaction after a few hours. Some people need more, they need to sleep on it. So sleep on it is very important. Anything in life, if you can sleep on it, it gives you a good sense of judgment because it resets your mind, it resets your brain. When you're too much focused on design, you have this bias, and this bias doesn't help you because you might like something, but that is from a very detailed kind of biased point of view. But if you can kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, you can notice a lot of things such as, okay, is the design too complicated? Is it easy to understand? Are the colors working? Sometimes you're so focused on a set of colors that you don't realize that the colors are just too green, for example. So that's the first thing I realized here. the colors are just not working, right? The green is just too much. It's overwhelming. And, you know, it doesn't go well with this purple. So the marriage of color is not working at all. And, you know, we have too many colors, and there's no purpose for these colors. Like, they don't marry each other. Like, when you work with colors, usually you want to use complementary colors, analogous colors, and that can determine how well they go together. And so, yeah, looking at this, it's just not there. It's very, very rough. And this is not to be, you know, difficult or mean to the designer who did this. It's just when it comes to design, it's important to be able to explain why and to not be biased about all like the things that I discussed. It's important to rely on principles and to explain things in a way that, you know, you can sort of like suggest how it can be better. So first of all, the menu, right? So the menu, it's okay. Typically when it comes to menu, you want to make it maybe a little bit bolder because it's interactive. So when something is a bit bolder, typically it's more interactive. So you want to make the text either to medium, semi-bold, or sometimes to bold, depending on what is the normal for your design. As I mentioned before, your logo should not be too detailed. If it's too detailed, it feels like an illustration that should be big. So a logo like this doesn't work because as you zoom out, it feels more like an object in the background or something that you cannot clearly see the detail of it, the definition of it. So let me give you an example. It's only after I zoom in that I see some of the details. So for example, these little reflections here, or the textures, the noise, the extra elements. So as soon as I zoom out, I don't clearly see what these mean, and you don't want to leave anything to chance. You want to make your logo as simple as possible and recognizable as possible. And so this is definitely not a logo, but more like an illustration that I would put maybe here or something next to text. And yeah, this image, I guess this is more of like my personal taste, but I can definitely judge on the level of colors. It's too green. Like, this is a bit blinding. The shape that is masking, I don't feel like there's an elegance to it. The text here, you want to make sure that it flows nicely, and yeah, it doesn't flow nicely. So a simple fix, this is a simple fix. 3 lines of text, and you know, like, it reads easier than this. Like this, it feels like experience the thrill of virtual gaming. You know, like, it should be experience the thrill of virtual gaming. And by putting it into 3 lines, it already fixed that. Maybe you can even put virtual gaming in the same line. So with a lot with trials and error, so like this, for example, experience the thrill of gaming, virtual gaming, looks a lot better. So I'm gonna put it back, but just to give you an example of how to improve your text, this is fine. There are just too many details, a bit distracting, the outline here. The padding is overwhelming. And also you want your design to be sharp. So you want to avoid these confusing, you don't know if it's blurry for the sake of blurry or if it's sharp, but it's not sharp. So you don't want to be in between. In design, you have to commit to it. It's not like, don't go half there. Like, you have to, either you go sharp or you go blur. But in this case, it feels like it's in middle. It's not sharp and it's not blur. And so it feels off, is the best term. It feels like it's incomplete. It feels unintended. And you want to avoid that kind of stuff. Design should be as intentional as possible And the user who used your design must feel like this was meant to be. This was meant to be this way. And it's a feeling. It's a lot about feeling. But if you do your design correctly, the feeling will be projected to your customers, to your audience. They're gonna feel naturally that your design is well done, because you have to treat your customers as really, really smart people. You cannot treat them as, excuse me the term, but dumb. You don't want to treat them as not intelligent. So yes, make sure that whatever you design, you know that people are going to appreciate the details and that they're going to care about it because you care about your design. So again, we have the same problems here. I think the colors are a little bit better. Here you can see it's overwhelmingly green. It's blindingly green. But here we don't have that problem anymore. Okay? But it's still distracting. So we still have the problem with logo and details that are barely visible. And we have a missing, we have logos here, but we're missing here. I think Suren is someone, as I work with her, she likes to experiment a lot. She takes a lot more risk. And it shows. She has many different styles of buttons versus Suhasid, she had like 1 or 2. Right? So it's fine. You have to know how to balance those things. Some people, they like to experiment more. They like to risk more. But of course, they're going to make more mistakes. And that's fine, as long as you kind of learn from those mistakes. And some people take less risk, and they don't get as creative, which is also fine, depending on what you're trying to build and how much time you have. So a little bit better. I think it flows a little bit better because like here I'm just blinded by the screen, and here now I can focus better on the other elements. So now I can focus on, okay, what this illustration mean, and the text and the content. So keep in mind that when you look at the design, you look at the website, you scan naturally. I mean, your brain learns how to scan fast. The same way you learn how to drive. You don't want to focus all your attention on just one stop sign. Well, it's the same for a design. So you're going to scan really quickly from left to right, from top to bottom. And that's why alignment is crucial. And so we see a problem here with alignment. The logo is not aligned here. And yeah, we have a bit of a trouble digesting this part. So this is centered, this is not centered. So you're like moving your eye like this, like this, like it's kind of zigzag, and you want to avoid that as much as possible. So the solution is you can align everything to the left. And so it's going to scan like this, and it feels a lot more, natural. And also consistency. We have a problem with consistency. So, you can see that Suren is experimenting with a different font like this one. But the question is, how do you pair fonts, right? So you have this font. Does it go well with this font? Maybe not, because this is definitely more futuristic, and this is more like professional and normal. And so, yeah, you want to be consistent. So also we have different font here, but at least she's trying, right? Like if you look at Suhas's design, it's always the same font. And you take risks, you make more mistakes, but you can pay off. And if it pays off, then you learn more. So yeah, we definitely have problem with fonts, consistency, buttons. We just need more experimentation to get to the right buttons. If I went back to Suhas's design, I think her buttons are good. They are already solid. But in this case, we haven't found a button that is like solid yet. Like if I look at this one, I think the gradient is a bit cheesy. It doesn't flow nicely. The font doesn't work well. We need something a little bit more solid. This one is fine. You know, I can see that as a final product. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so here it's getting better even. So, you know, we went from level 1 and then level 2 and now level 3. So this is clearly bad in terms of like, especially the green. This is a little bit better. And I think this is something where we can finally take some elements that could work. So let's take a look at some of the details. Now we still have the same problems. The fonts, you know, the way she's playing with the sizes, it doesn't flow naturally. You can see that her weakness is definitely typography. And she's trying a lot. So you can see that she loves neuromorphic designs, right? She loves this top left, you know, lights and bottom right shadow. You know, she wants to go very detailed, but unfortunately it's not working. And it requires a lot of time because you're taking a lot of risk. You need more time to fulfill, you know, and the more risky your design is, the more time it's going to take to make it perfect. So yeah, she definitely need a lot more time on this design, but also a lot more direction, a lot more feedback. So I think that's why I'm giving her this feedback. I think the background here works nicely. It's clean. It's interesting. The background blur is interesting. The colors are interesting on top of the background. And I don't know, the entire thing flows a lot more natural, especially because we're using the purple here and this is not as green. So the green here doesn't work with the purple here, but this kind of like purpley-ish hue. So you want to set, if you're not sure about colors, set the same hue. So the background is purple hue and the background for this header is also purple, but using a more neutral purple, right? Such as this would work well. But if I said to before, it doesn't work well. Do you see how it just doesn't flow together? But if I put it back to purple, and let's say I add more saturation, now it looks a lot better. And then this comes with time. How to play with colors, how to pair colors, how to pair fonts. And yeah, some good elements. I would say, I think these lines are interesting. Maybe a little bit more thought into it, a little bit more time. This hexagon work here better than the rest of the pages. So it feels like it flows nicely here, almost as if it's guiding me. But here it feels like isolated and kind of by itself and lonely. But here it's like guiding my eye to like scanning. You know, the colors are nicely organized and I feel more at ease when I look at this. Yeah, add more padding and pair better the fonts together. Pair better the colors together, purple with purple. Don't mix too much the styles. So in this case, you see that she's kind of going neuromorphic, but the rest is not neuromorphic at all. So be more consistent. Pick one direction and go for it. Don't create a Frankenstein of a design, because a lot of beginners, it's not clear to them, but it's clear to someone who's more senior, especially you go to an interview for design and there's going to be a senior designer looking at your work. They will know right away from the consistency of your design first if that design is 100% yours. Because most designers make the mistake of stealing other people's design or copying other people's design, and then they copy well, but they haven't developed the skill of consistency, which means that when they copy one button, it doesn't fit with another button, and the senior designer looking at it will know right away that this is not yours and that there's a problem with your design. So try to be more consistent. Try to commit to one style, to one font, right? Simplify. Don't go into too much the detail. Don't take too much risk. I can barely see this house. I can barely see this symbol. And looking at 100%, I can barely see the details. Every detail should be well defined. All of these details are lost when I zoom out. So we got to be careful with those things, especially presenting the design. And also, if I look at the 100% zoom, yeah, you want to upscale this because we can see the pixelation. Yeah, those are minor details, but they go a long way. And especially if you put everything together, it's going to be a lot better. So that's it for this design, and we're going to move on to the next one. Hi, welcome back. And we're going to do the third design review, and this time I'm going to review from our most senior designer, and I think she's the most talented and detail-oriented. Not saying that the other two are not talented, but she definitely started before, and she's responsible for all of the for a lot of the new designs that we pick as the final. So for example, you know, the web app UI, and she guides the whole team a lot more. So keep in mind that, you know, me and Axon, we work very closely together, and you know, we've been working together for a long time, so she knows how I work. And we also the term is recycling a lot, and every designer does that, by the way, so I'm not ashamed to say it. So I think it's a good topic, the topic of recycling design. So what I'm going to say about recycling design is that you don't always need to start from scratch. In fact, you shouldn't always start from scratch. In fact, you should never start from scratch. Why? Because starting from scratch means taking a lot more risks that are unnecessary. If the design is simple, fine. You know, you're doing a little pamphlet or a little button, sure. But if it's a whole website, typically you don't really want to start from scratch. There are very specific UI patterns out there. But in this case, of course, we're starting from a Midjourney concept. So, you know, these are some of the concepts that I personally generated and that she chose, and we worked together on them. I think they have really good colors and really good elements that I really enjoy personally. So for example, some of these, you know, charts look really good together. The colors, agency work well. The cards, the information structure, the contrast ratio, you know, the way the elements are placed together are very interesting. And I can map it in my mind. So the same with this one, really good contrast. You know, you have this black next to the white one. It goes really well together. You just need to define each of those details really better. The same with this one, really good color that pops out, which is the yellow. And really nice agency. I really like also this one, the shape, the way that it went from dark to light, the way that it goes well with the 3D, the perspective. And so we landed on this one. Again, keep in mind that the way that I work, I don't like to spend a lot of time, and I have so many things to do. You know, every Monday I have to do these design reviews, and I have my own designs. I have my own courses. As you know, if you've been following me on Twitter, I've been playing with AI a lot. So I do all of them mostly by myself. And on top of that, I help create this course for the designers in our team. So when I work on something, I don't give myself a lot of time, like maybe a couple hours, okay? And for them, it's more like days. So that comes with experience, that comes with the understanding of sacrifice and compromise, but at the same time, knowing how to navigate around those things and not making it obvious or even seemingly so for other people. So for example, when we first started, I went with this one, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start with something, I'm going to let her work from there. And one of the mistakes that a lot of senior designers, or I mean, I still make those mistakes, is managing, right? Managing is very difficult. So how do you get the best out of every designer in your team? And it's difficult no matter how many years of experience that you have or that your designers have. The question is, how do you adapt to their level of skills and understanding and motivations? And in this case, it didn't work well because I started with this. I obviously, because of lack of time, I recycle a lot of my own designs. So for example, this logo or this menu here, I took from another design. The same with the title. So as a good starting point, okay? And then we went with this layout. So this element right here, if you think about it, is simply the same as this element right here. Now you're going to be like, why, man, they're different. No, they're not. That's the thing. Every element is a recycle of another element. If you do it properly, of course. Not many designs are started from scratch. Even Apple, like if you look at the recent designs of Apple, they're basically iterations of older designs. And that's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with recycling design. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. So if you look at the title, description, button, the only thing that's changing is the size, right? So what size go well together? You know, what kind of size that does this button have to go well with this title? What kind of size that this button have to go well with this title? And what is the balancing? It's really a balancing act between elements. Like what size does this icon have to go well with this text? How do you separate the information architecture? Where do you put the line? Right? Where do you put the logo? So these things would come to you naturally over time. And you don't need to stress too much about starting from scratch every single time, right? So this structure here went to this structure here, and then we did multiple of them. We changed the text. Personally, as a designer, I never like to put like lorem ipsum or, title description. I don't like that because I like to make my design feel like it could be the final app, a screenshot of the final app. And that's just the way I work. And I like to envision and plan as much as possible ahead so that when it comes to coding it, I know it's going to work. I know that this text is going to have about 4 lines of text. I know this is going to have about 1 or 2 lines of text. I know this is 1 line of text. So all of these things have to be mapped into your head, and then the content itself should accommodate that as much as possible, and whatever happens otherwise. So for example, if we have more than 4 lines of text, then we're going to have the ellipses, right? So again, I didn't spend a lot of time here, like maybe 30 minutes or so, a lot of recycling. I spent a lot of time on this particular thing because I had to draw the shape. Well, first of all, the Midjourney render, and then I had to draw the shape, I had to mask it, and then I had to blur it, and everything had to go well together. That's it. And then I have to adapt from this layout to this layout, setting some of the elements that are more unique, which is where I spend most of the time on, is some of these elements, such as these lines, these lines here, these circles here. But yes, not a lot of time. And then, you know, I asked Axon, okay, you can work from that, maybe. And so she tried to get inspired, and she did that. And you know, it's not bad. It's pretty good. We also work a little bit on some of these toggle, which ended up in the final result, by the way, in my sign up page. And we tried different colors. I mean, she tried different colors. And also looking at all of the different renders in Midjourney. You know, I set the prompts, which I share in the course. And that's as far as my collaboration with her goes. So keeping that in mind, we're going to look at the final result, or at least the early results from her. And you're going to see it's very similar. So remember that I tweeted about this specific design. And again, this is all taking the same design, recycling from what I just mentioned. So I took a vector, I vectorized it. I took a Midjourney render, I vectorized it, which is why it's super sharp. But focusing on the colors, you can see that it's really easy to digest. Sure, the design is not perfect. I didn't spend a ton of time on it. It's not, you know, I'm not trying to create, you know, I like to think that the more time that you have, the more your design can be amazing and perfect. But some people, they don't have that budget. In my case, I just don't. I don't have dozens or hundreds of hours to spend on one button or one logo or one page, right? Some companies have that, and that's great for them, and they make amazing stuff. Like Apple makes great stuff, but they have a ton more budget than I do. And with the time that I have and the amount of, you know, resources that I have, this is what I can create in this amount of time. And so the question is how to be efficient, how to be confident, how to create something out of nothing, or out of your previous experience, or out of recycling, to be as effective as possible. And so you look at the design, this took, you know, an hour or two, maybe. I don't remember exactly, but I just don't spend a lot of time on my designs for sure. Yes, I wanted to see how I can fit my illustration from Midjourney, and then I adapted the colors from the design that you saw earlier, which is this one, from gray to purple, from the more futuristic looking to the more traditional looking, and the more like a hiking website looking, right? And that's why I went a little bit with a different type of font that I feel maybe could fit better this more traditional approach. These different logos, but still keep in mind that the texts have to go well together, right? And I put a little bit of time on this button so that they work well with the background color. They're more bluish, kind of midnight-ish. And I think they work well. You know, I slept on it, went back, and I'm like, okay, I think it's still good. You know, I don't hate myself. And this button's kind of interesting with the background blur, even though I would say it's a bit more futuristic, but sometimes the challenge is to make it work with an older style. So this is me. And you can see that looking at Accent's design, she took a lot of what I created. And, you know, this goes both ways. I'm not saying that, you know, she's the only one who does that. I do that from her design as well. Sometimes I like some of the buttons that she makes, and so I use it on my, you know, on my design. I adapt it. And the key is to adapt, right? Because nowadays you can find resources everywhere. You can download thousands of templates. You can buy one for $30 and you can just change all the content and make it yours. But it's a special skill to be able to adapt that design. If you don't do it well, it's going to look like a Frankenstein, and it's not going to be very effective, and people are going to second guess your implication in the design, and you don't want that. So if you do a good job, people are not going to notice. And like I said before, design should be as transparent, as natural as possible. So looking at this, I see that she didn't change that much. Okay, this probably, she was playing more with the background. She's very artistic. She knows her colors. And I can see that every time I look at her designs, I have this sense that she knows exactly what she wants to create in terms of the colors, the agency, the attractiveness of it. Versus Surani, I think she's experimenting a lot more. She's unsure. But like, I personally would have picked roughly the same caliber of illustration in the background, right? Like, it looks great. So this, I wouldn't say there's much change, so I can't really judge much here. I can see that she didn't change much some of the elements that we did for the smart home. She did make a bit of change here. It's not bad. It's not there yet. She did some gradient here, and I can see that Suhani picked some of those. So again, we play with each other's elements, and it's totally normal. If you're in the design team, you'll probably bounce back and forth and reuse each other elements. That's totally normal in the design. This is not meant to be as a negative light. Okay, so this looks a lot more interesting now. Like, this is different from what I design, right? And this looks great. Honestly, like, this is, I love what I have, what I see so far. The colors are amazing. The contrast is great. And, you know, I think the type works. Like, every element goes well, and she went more for a search landing page rather than what I started with, which is more like the traditional title description button. And then she went with a browse. And she's, as you can see, she picks the best images, and she's so good at that, right? She's so good that sometimes I'm jealous myself. So that's a good sign. That means she has great taste. And as I mentioned before, taste is incredibly important in design. Maybe her execution is not at the level of my experience, but her taste is definitely there. So you can see she's picking a lot of great images, the great colors that goes well together. And when she's trying some of these really cool concept, like this curve line here, it's original and it looks great. It's, you know, as Steve Jobs put it, something that he would lick, you know, because so it's really nice. So sometimes you want to be playful. Sometimes you want to make your design so attractive that people want to lick it, like a candy or something. But that, you know, you want to make people excited. You want to make people enjoy and talk about it, find it interesting. But in terms of like backgrounds, and so you can see like really nice colors from the background blur, and she's using this blending mode for the outline. It looks great. That's why her designs are really popular on YouTube. Every time we share her designs on Twitter and YouTube, a lot of people like them. And her videos, when we present them, they get really popular. And they are as popular as mine. So she's very, very good. And it shows, the audience knows, they vote, and we have the results. So, you know, small things, I would add a little bit more padding maybe on the top. It feels that it needs to breathe a little bit more. 16 maybe is not enough, maybe 20 or 30 from the sides. I think the font works. I don't know what this font is versus the other one. Oh, it's pop-in. Okay, that's why. So she has definitely more consistency versus, let's say, the designs from Suani, for example. She takes less risk in terms of typography. That's fine. You don't have to take so much risk that you make so many mistakes. But I do like the gradient from the pink to the purple. As you can see, pink and purple always work, right? We've done so many designs using pink and purple that people sometimes comment that all our designs are pink and purple. I mean, we're fine with that as long as it's good. Okay, so here she played a little bit more with the search, which I think she recycled from the last course that she did, which is the web app. And here as well, a little bit of recycling, which is fine. She adapted, she added a bit of glow here, which is nice. I love it. This button seems a bit incomplete. Maybe a little bit of glow would help make it more complete. It feels a little bit incomplete, like out of place, especially alongside the other elements. In terms of sizing, I think this might be a little bit too big. And you know that something is too big when it feels like it doesn't breathe in the space that it has. So for example, this is how much space that it has, and this is how much it's taking in terms of space. So when you think about sizing, you have to think about the container and the proportions within the container. So in this case, I would probably put it like 28 and move it. So she used auto layout. I don't want to break her design, but you can see that it's too big. And also you know that it's too big when it's kind of like going overboard, especially if your text is longer. So definitely reduce the size here, but the rest is fine. She's playing safe, meaning that she's taking a lot of my text and she's just rearranging it from something that already works. Again, great decision. I have nothing against that for sure. So this is what we have so far, and as I can see from all the things that we have worked so far, I think if I have to pick a design to go from there for the new section of our course, I will pick this one for sure. And then we can start from here. We can add more. We can refine it. We can spend another 5 days on it. The whole team refining it, adding other elements, going deeper into the interactions. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed these videos and kind of the thinking process coming from a Midjourney concept to different iterations, the time limit that we have, keeping in mind that we only had a day and a half to get this far. And how do we go from there and go deeper? So what I want to do is maybe in the future, I'm going to show you the final result, and you're going to see it when we're going to post it as part of the course, because the final result is what we take. And from that final result, we teach all the techniques that I've explained and so much more. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you liked it, let me know. I'd be happy to do more of these videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.